All right, we're live, boys.
We're live.
We are live.
We live.
Yeah, live.
Good morning. Cheers.
Assuming my technical difficulties don't flare up. So we'll check one more time. Yeah, we're good.
It looks like we've got volume.
By the way, that's decaf coffee.
Yes.
So this is the real thing. This is cup number 3.
Wow.
Yeah.
We're on a new kick at my house about the amount of caffeine we intake.
It's like I can only give up so many vices at a time.
And there's a school of thought out there. I've actually did a little research that caffeine, when metabolized the right way, is actually good for you.
Right. That's what I'm. Yeah. Anyway.
You know, my problem is not the problem. My challenge is that I could literally have 3 cups of coffee in a row.
That's
Like with no problem. And I'm not even really concerned about the benefits or the disadvantages. I just, at that point, I don't even feel right. I'm like, what's going on?
So is it just coffee though? Is there anything in it?
Well, I'm usually not eating, and then I'm usually having coffee.
That's where the MCT oil
I have nothing
really helps.
I have
Is
nothing.
it what you feel more full, like you don't need another cup?
What I've studied on my own is that when you don't have anything in your coffee, you get a big push.
That makes sense.
And then you get a big crash.
That makes sense.
Where the MCT oil is designed to give you the little bit of feeling, but then it's a lot slower.
Got it.
Right down.
Right. Which would make sense, because if you're drinking it on any empty stomach, you're probably getting more of the stimulant. Mm-hmm. Whereas the MCT oil probably it
kind
metabolizes
lessens
slower.
the blow, metabolizes slower.
Yeah, but see, I like the jolt. You know what I mean? Like
I do too.
I
On
like
the
to
first
be
cup.
halfway through a cup of coffee and go, okay.
Don't your stomach ever get upset?
There it is.
Yeah. My stomach would get upset. Like the
See,
second one, I'll be like,
the fat takes care of that.
yeah, see, that's what I need to do. I have the MCT oil. It's not a habit yet to put it in it. I used to do it. There you go. Yeah.
It's not atomic yet.
I got to make it part of my atomic
I got to make it
habit.
atomic, baby.
Well,
Well, that's a good segue, I guess, right there.
speaking of habits, yeah. No, I think what we wanted to chat a little bit about this morning was the platform. What we've now call within our business we call it the PD call, but short for personal development call. And just wanted to talk about kind of how we came about that, what that is, and really open the doors to some tactical stuff to just really say, hey, here's what we do. This may be something that other people can borrow from. By no means is it the answer, but it's something for us that's been a cool platform to kind of commit to and to revisit and to grow within. And I know it's near and dear to all of our hearts, but specifically to you guys, kind of lead off of like where this came from, why, what, just kind of open up the doors.
Yeah, man. Well, I'll kick it to my man here, because I guess we can go back to origins of where
It's
it
funny.
came
I wrote
from,
down
but,
origin.
maybe I'll just share. Maybe I'll just share why it's important to me, and then you can do the same, and then we can go down the rabbit hole for a second. But man, this has been like such a pinnacle part of my professional growth, just me personally. It's like that constant. I forget what book we read a while ago. It was like the 20-mile march. What was that? It was like that wasn't good to great.
Great by choice.
Great by
choice.
choice.
Yeah,
Great by choice. It was,
Collins.
like the 20-mile march, and basically he talked about that all great organizations have this stamina where they have this minimum standard, and they might not always be doing what the competitors are doing in regards to the level of velocity that other companies are doing it, but the sustainability that they have is just very plot the course, right? They have that minimum standard. And I feel like for me personally, this has been kind of like my minimum standard. And, I don't judge myself in times that I'm like really good. Like, you do the 75 hard, or you do all these challenges and stuff. For me, I don't look at it like, because that's when everybody wants to give you encouragement and they reach out to you. You're like, oh, you're so inspiring. It's like, to me, that's not really the hard part. To me, the hard part is when you like don't want to do anything, and then you still do something. anyway. And I feel like personal development is one of those things for me, to where it's like the gym. Sometimes you just want to go to the gym. Sometimes you want to read and consume all the time. But I don't know about you guys, but then there's some times where I just don't, like, at all. It's just burdensome, like sometimes I just want to turn on the TV, and sometimes I just don't want to. It just seems like a discipline that's just tough to practice. So the call has been one of those things to where, hell or high water, it's just what we do, and it forces you to do something that there's no way you would have done it, even though it's important. So the call is kind of like the workout partner of the gym for me. And maybe it keeps you on the wagon for 3 months when you would have completely fell off, which gives you enough time to gain momentum back to where you actually enjoy it again. So for me, it's been just a cool part of my personal journey. So,
well, and I agree with all that. It's easy to promote personal development in a call when you're on your game. It's really challenging when you're in that mode where maybe you're on a scale of 1 to 10, you're below a 7, and you're just like, you realize your consistency's not there. The cadence is off. Like, we've been talking a lot about when we get up and when we read or when we listen to something, but when that cadence gets off a little bit and you're kind of all over the place, it's not ingrained at a certain time. I think that also lends to the times it gets tough. But you started to say something that I think is important when we talk about personal development as a partnership and as friends, and then bringing it into our business. I mean, if you go back to 2006, when we first started working together, we learned about systems, right? We learned about how important systems were in business in general. It didn't matter really what industry it was, but for us at the time, part of that system was calls.
Yep.
So learning how to attend a call, learning how to be present on a call, learning how to contribute to a call, and then ultimately learning how to run a call became so ingrained back in the early days of our friendship and partnership. I always remember learning about that system and learning that we do a call on Sunday nights and we do a call on Tuesday nights or Tuesday nights. And without fail, those calls, you could always trust them, right? So it's easy to build it into a habit. It's easy to know that on Sunday at 9 o'clock, we have a call. On Tuesday at 7, 8 o'clock, we have a call. 30-minute call. It starts on time. It ends on time. When I think about origins and I think about our call today, it's neat to see that we still abide by those rules, right? It's here's the day, here's the time, it starts on time, it ends on time, and you can 100% trust that it's going on. The other thing we learned about is that we still continue to practice today is it's a voluntary thing, right? Back then we were learning the systems of the business we were involved in, and I think about how it was a voluntary component of the system, but yet if you wanted to experience the type of growth that it was going to take to progress in what we were doing, really you had to be on, you had to be there. So to me, I really think about those early days in ingraining, I don't necessarily want to call it a habit, but ingraining the task, the discipline that, this goes on every week, and this is just part of who we are and what we do. So that's what I think about when I think about our call today, and I look at the evolution. I look at the way, and even with us, right? Early on, we're like, what are you going to talk about on a call? And then when you go for a while, like, oh, okay, that makes sense, and the encouragement and the things behind it. So anyway, that's my initial thoughts when we talk about this call.
Yeah, and the call. So what year did it start?
Well, we were first introduced to it 2006, beginning of 2007.
So it's basically been almost 15 years, but within Urban Young, since the inception, 2011. So, but what's interesting, you've had times where there's feedback like, hey, the calls should be longer, or the calls should be every other month, or whatever it is, right? And I always, it kind of fits within certain leadership philosophies, like say less more often. And I think about have a shorter call more often, because it creates the platform that it catches people in rhythm, out of rhythm, but it's consistent, and so they can kind of plug in where it is. And there's also been, we'll talk a little bit about the structure of it, because I think it's important as far as having that platform you trust, that there's a consistency in how it's approached because of the content that is within that 30 minutes. To have it start and finish in a similar fashion with different personalities thrown in, I think lends itself to consistency, duplication, to really be able to get out of it for what people are willing to put in. And also what you mentioned, it is completely optional, but what you mentioned about also, like, if you're wanting to progress within an ecosystem, there's just certain things that are less optional, right? Meaning it's like not mandatory at all. But at the same time, if you say you want certain things, then it may be mandatory for those things that you say you want. Like, for example, you mentioned it being optional. We went through a phase of the business where probably 3, 4, 5 years in, that we would start to, hey, how cool would it if we provided the books, or we provided the audio, right? It's a nice employee benefit. But then you come back to it, and we made a strategic decision to say, hey, look, no, this is people's personal development. This doesn't have to do with Urban Young, right? This isn't even professional development. This is personal development. And I think that subtlety lend itself to say, look, people need to make the investment if it's something they want. And there's something about somebody committing, whether it be $5 or $15, or their intention and effort to go on Amazon and buy the book, or go to the store and buy the book. There's something about that investment that it's about them, and it's not about Urban Young. And I think that's what I've enjoyed mostly about the platform. And I think that's also the hardest thing to sustain as we grow, and people are, that have been here for a long time and they understand what they've gotten out of it, but somebody's brand new. I think the hardest part as we grow is to really focus and say, guys, this isn't an Urban Young call. This is a personal development call. And it just happens to be that it's a group of Urban Young team members.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's easier to perpetuate that when you have buy-in from the culture than it is that I just think about anybody that's listening to this right now, that I don't do a call, to get 20, 30 people to all of a sudden show up on a weekly call. That would be a challenging deal, because they'd be like, it's kind of like the flavor of the month thing. It's like, is this really going to be around? Right. Is this just something we're doing right now? Is this really us? But when you have the majority of the organization bought into that, and you have a new team member come in and you go, oh, okay, well, this is just what the group does. This is just part of the culture. It's easier. So I empathize with that a little bit. I think we have an advantage just because we did start it from the inception. So it's just always been a part of what we did. No one ever really second guessed it because it was always just there, right? So, but it's funny you talk about the platform, right? And I look at the call as definitely a platform and an outlet. Number one, for each person first and foremost, because it's an opportunity to consume content about a book. For example, we're running through Atomic Habits right now, right? So, and just so everybody's aware, if you've listened to the podcast in the past, you probably have heard this before, but we do a bi-weekly call, and we talk about some specific chapters. We'll either do one chapter or 2 chapters, and someone leads the call, someone intros the call, checks everybody in. People start when they come onto the call 10 minutes early. They say their name. Somebody checks them in, so everybody knows who's on the call and who's not on the call. It's a fun, playful time for us to kind of collaborate. And then once the call starts, it starts right on time, and we go through our 3 pillars. Showing up, activity, and personal development. The host goes through that, what they are, why they're important, maybe shares a little story about something particular with one of those components, and then edifies the person that's leading that call. And then that person basically is in charge of leading a discussion about whatever those chapters are. And that's the basis of the call. But it provides this outlet for people to actually participate. And how many times in leadership, or how many times for anybody that is in charge of leading a team, they just want people to participate. They're begging for participation. And I think the cool thing about the call is that it's kind of like this staple component that allows people an outlet to speak. It allows them an outlet to participate, allows them an outlet to contribute. And sometimes they don't contribute a lot in the beginning, and then slowly over time, hopefully they contribute more. But just the mechanics and basis and structure of the platform, and this could be a call, it could be anything, right? It doesn't have to be a call. That's why I like using the word platform, because it could be an event. It could be anything at the office. It could be off the office. It could be meeting at somebody's house for a dinner. It could be getting together after work. It could be happy hours, whatever it may be. But it's a structure that is intelligently designed to give people the opportunity to participate. And it allows the opportunity to teach specific skill sets. And people don't even know they're learning the skill sets. So, for example, you're talking, and what we've learned from running these calls, and obviously what other people have learned from engaging in these calls. And I was actually talking to Matt before we walked in here, and just about all the lessons and all the leadership and all the practitionership that he's learned since he started at the agency on so many broad personal development topics. And this is be one of them. But organization, right? Learning how to be organized, learning how to structure the content, learning how to line up guests to speak on the call, right? Learning how to line up the host. How about coaching the host on what they need to do and what they need to be thinking about and make sure they hit specific points? Getting people to work together, right? Inviting people to contribute and participate instead of you getting on a call and just talking for 30 minutes, right? Because those are two different skill sets, right? Making it warm enough to where people want to contribute. And the biggest one for me is promotion. I think as anybody who's looking to build anything, I think they're great promoters. And these calls, they are voluntary, right? So you say, how do you get people to show up these voluntary calls? Well, we are promoters. We promote these calls. We engage in conversation. We send out group text messages. We send out teasers. You'll send out a picture of a passage in the specific chapter of the book to evoke a conversation, 2-3 days before we have the call. It's an engagement in promoting this event that's coming up. That creates a little bit of a buzz, instead of saying, this is the call, you need to be on this call, this is what we do, right? It's totally the opposite, right? It's, man, you got to make sure you're on this call. This call is going to be dynamic. Did you read chapter 10? Oh my gosh, there was this passage about this, and that. It was unbelievable. And then they, oh yeah, you're right. Or maybe they didn't read it and they're like, oh yeah, no, I haven't read it yet. They kind of feel almost like, oh man, maybe I'm missing out, because they are missing out. But it's the way you approach it. So we learned, and I think all of us learned on that promotion is so much more powerful than holding somebody to have to do something, because it's voluntary. And if you can learn how to promote really well, you can influence in a positive way instead of influence in a negative way, if that makes sense.
You remind me of inviting versus promoting. Right? The art of sending an invite where it's just, hey, we have a call going on, versus the way you explained the promotion. We've got a call going on tonight. We're going to discuss chapter 10. You can't believe what we learned in chapter 10 and what we heard about and the things we're going to talk about. And Taylor leading it tonight. And
you don't
with his experience, right? It's like, it's what can you continue to put on that promotion that's going to entice somebody to say, man, I really want to be part of that. And one other thing that you said that triggered a thought with me is applying what the chapter, I've always viewed it as you're applying the chapter to your practical life. Mm-hmm. So whether you're getting on the call because you think it's, well, everybody else is on the call, right? In the early days, that's probably what you mentioned, Matt Eckberg, right? I mean, you talk about, there's a story right there. I mean, when we first started these calls, it was the three of us. We said, we're going to do a call. It was only the three of us. And then all of a sudden Matt was there. And Matt's like, man, this is weird. Like, what are you guys doing? Right? And that evolution that's taken place to now he's eating books, and you can see a different.
Well, he's learned promotion.
He's learned
right?
promotion.
Learns
He's had leadership.
to line up a host for the call.
Yep.
And not just line up a host, but make sure that they know the practices that need to be hit on, when to start, how to engage in conversation. Make sure you write everybody's name down so you can continually repeat it so everybody knows who's on the call at the end. Keep it engaging and fun with conversation so the energy doesn't drop.
Yep.
These subtleties that you learn, making sure that it starts on time, making sure that you end on time, making sure that you give everybody a chance to speak. There's just all these different things that are inherent, subtle leadership lessons that if you practice those in a confined, safe environment where everybody kind of knows what is going on, they're not going to be blindsided with something, right? If you go out of the office and go on a call for a marketing thing or a referral source, and you're going to go do a cold touch, right? And you're walking into a cold environment. Man, the risk for that's way high. If I'm not used to that, what if somebody corners me? What if they ask me a question?
What if they say no?
Like, what if I get in a really tough spot? Like, this is super, super out of my comfort zone. Whereas the call, it's the same way every single time. So therefore, it creates this safe environment where people can feel comfortable coming out a little bit of their shell and just taking a step out and then retreating back. And it creates a comfort for them to maybe do some things that they wouldn't have done if they didn't have an outlet that was available to them to be able to do it.
Yeah, and then there's certain things that are the same every time, but there's also the content's different every time, right? Sure. Because the person leading in their life or whatever it is, whatever lens that they're viewing that content and applying it through is communicated differently with different styles. So I think it's important to say some things are intended to be the same every time in the way they're approached. But the delivery and the content, the level of disagreement about information, right? Make no mistake, on a lot of our calls over the years, right? There's been hey, that's interesting information. I haven't experienced it in my own life. And it's more of a healthy, respectful disagreement in a conversation about information rather than a group think and it's however many different people reading the same information with different lenses at different times in their lives and having a platform to discuss it. And I think that is another subtle difference that is a big deal, right? You can tell the difference between, hey, I'm supposed to read this and believe it, and I guess I talk about it like I believe it because that's just what you do. Well, not necessarily. You're just supposed to read it, comprehend it, and probably internalize it, get a feel, be a good listener at first. And then you'll start to have more experience, and then it'll probably lend to having more practical, I read that and I experienced that, and let me tell you and share that experience so I can now contribute to the call. So again, all subtleties, but the platform exists so that stuff can come to light, because that stuff, in our belief, is stuff that's healthy and will come to light anyway. I think it's a good environment, like you mentioned, a safe environment and an effective, respectful environment, that it's cool to disagree and it's cool to agree.
Yeah.
It's cool to not say anything at all. And it's,
and make no mistake, like every call is different because it's different content, different people delivering it, different questions. Maybe everybody agrees, then maybe one everybody doesn't agree, right? So don't misunderstand me. I guess, but from a platform standpoint, if I'm going to step out of my comfort zone and engage in this, I know the boundaries, I know the structure, I know what it is, and I feel safe enough to where I can step out and retreat back. And if you don't give, my opinion is, if you don't give team members who aren't ready, let's just call it how it is, team members who are not ready, if you don't give them the opportunity or the ability to be able to just step a little bit out and then retreat back,
right,
and give them a safe environment where they can feel comfortable to do that, and you just expect them in an environment where anything can happen to just do maybe what you would do, you're not giving them an opportunity to grow. And for us, I know we've talked about this offline, I think it's a secret sauce, even though it's so simple. Sometimes the most dynamic, amazing things are not complicated. They're simple. It's just a matter of actually doing them, and consistently. I think it's been a cool part of our journey that allows people to progress slowly and then bite off more, 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 and then all of a sudden they wake up and they go, man, what was it? And you go, I don't really know what it was. And you go, well, maybe it was the 25 books that they read that they probably wouldn't have read, that had nothing to do with business, that just had to do about them getting better, right? Or maybe it had to do with them that they had to lead a call when they weren't ready and you asked them to. And they said, you know what, I'm not ready for this one. And then you pushed back and said, but what would have to happen if you were ready? And they were forced into an uncomfortable spot that they didn't want to do, but because you leaned on them a little bit, that then they did it and they felt amazing about themselves, and then all of a sudden that transcribes to somewhere else in their business, and all because there's a place where there's this puddle where people can come play in and not have to worry about the hazards of what happens when you leave the office and do that.
Yeah,
sometimes it's intimidating.
There's an invitation to come join this conversation, I think, is a cool way. Because when you say invitation versus promotion, that subtle difference lends, hey, be on this call because this is going to be a great thing, or hey, we'd like to invite you on this call so you could come make your own assessment of what you believe this could mean to you.
And it allows people to think, I think it allows people to realize that they're not by themselves. That we're talking about this specific topic, and two people chime in and say, man, I have a really hard time with that. I'm just being transparent, and there's 6 other people on the other end of the line going, oh man, I wanted to say that, or that's me, but I would never let everybody know that because I don't want anybody to know that I struggle with that. But then you hear other people, then you know what? Okay, well that's normal. Okay, well that makes me feel better. That makes me feel more safe. That makes me feel like, okay, I can talk about this. Maybe they lean in a little bit more to what they have to say because it's third party, right? They've heard it from maybe their direct report or the person that's leading them on a daily basis. But then they hear it from somebody that they don't get to talk to all the time, and they go, wow, okay, maybe there is something to that because I'm hearing it from a different person. So yeah, to have that much dialogue go on a consistent basis is cool, because all of us kind of have the same thoughts and the same insecurities and the same struggles and the same opportunities. We just don't necessarily always voice it.
Well, and then the other thing too, as you mentioned, that's the platform that starts a conversation, but it's also encouraged that those conversations continue offline. There's just no way that the level of growth or development you're gonna experience it by engaging for 30 minutes once a week, twice, every month. Like, it's just impossible. Time's just not on your side. But that 30-minute platform may spark a conversation that the next time you go to work or the next time you're out to drinks or you're at lunch with one of your team members, you go, hey, you said this, and and it perpetuates. And I think that that's a cool part of the platform, is that it's not necessarily about that time. It's about that time transitioning and you now going, okay, I engaged in this book, I absorbed it, I learned from it. Now, optionally, hey, maybe I'm more likely to pick up something, practice it, and practice it, or pick some other book up that's, because that platform gave me the permission to do that. Not just because we've also seen over the years too, it's like, and this is us too, you can't expect, if you want to be a 9, right, or 9 or 10 in your own life and personal growth in an area, for you to just read 1 chapter a week of a good book, you're probably not going to get there. So we've always said, like, look, if this is the only thing that you're engaging in, then you're probably not going to have the compounding work for somebody who is engaged in this, but also something else they're interested in, or listening to audio, right? So I think that is a part of it, that this is just a little dip your toe in the water kind of thing that engages you in the activity that leaves your mind a little bit more.
I think along those lines, originally you guys were talking about, well, fundamentally and from a philosophical standpoint, the call never changes, right? And what I think about originally, what we learned early on is start on time, end on time, and leave people hungry, right? Like people that get on the call for the first time, or that don't feel comfortable stepping out and maybe making a comment, but then once the call gets going, because the call is the same, the message is the same, right? And we know that in good leadership, and our culture allows this, you said this earlier, our culture allows for us to have something it doesn't ever change. It's not a flavor of the month. We know it's going to be there. We know it's going to stick. And we know that the wiring of that call never changes. The structure, right? But then we also know that our philosophy is say more by saying less, right? Keep people hungry for more so that they're excited for the next week. But what I think about is momentum, right? I think about that momentum. It's like when they're hungry for the next call, they're way more apt to talk about it in a practical setting, maybe the next morning at work. How would you think about that? And we've seen this, right? We've heard this. To me, that's what's been fun about watching the evolution. We've got more momentum with the call now than we've ever had.
That, a great example of that is when you watch your core leaders and different key component team members sending pictures of the books that they're reading, like they're on a page, right?
That's right.
And you're in a group text and somebody sends something and then somebody else sends something. And that's a perfect example. It's
or
like
a podcast.
That's a level of, number one, it's a level of just, hey, I'm excited about sharing it, but that creates promotion, whether they mean to or not. It's like, wow, okay. It just, you're creating this buzz around this activity, right?
Well, and you take that a step further. By someone then feeling comfortable, they think they're just sharing what else they've kind of stumbled upon or experienced or discovered for themselves. But really, what they're doing is they're flexing a leadership muscle, right? They've given themselves permission to say, I'm going to engage in this. I can trust this. Every time I get on here, I hear rich content. Some of it I can apply practically. Maybe some of the comments that I hear that I agree with, or maybe that I don't agree with. But for me, the fun thing is once they give themselves that permission, maybe to jump into a different subject matter or something on their own, when they feel compelled to be able to share that back in that safe environment, to me, that's almost the height of leadership development. It's like, I'm going from being told what to read to now I'm going to share with someone else what I'm discovering and reading.
That's a great point. We should do that. In a way of, we've had a lot of people ask about the call. We've had different people ask to be on the call, which is always a touchy one because, you want to share what you love the most, but it's always been this exclusive thing that we've wanted to keep for just team members.
It's almost like better word than exclusive is intimate.
Yeah, that's a better word.
Because does that make sense?
Yeah, it's just it's intimate, but also in a sense of it makes it potent to know that this is something that is part of a fraternity, and being a part of this team. There are some cool things that come from only the people within an organization sharing a unique experience. And to me, that's culture. When a group of people share in one specific experience that nobody outside of that group experiences, that's what creates culture. And so having these calls and only team members being involved or invited to be on these calls, it creates this cohesive experience between just those people. So it creates connection and it creates camaraderie. But even then, we've wanted to share that in the past, and it makes it uncomfortable just because you want to, because it's such a cool thing for people to ask about. But maybe it'd be fun if we played a call, just from one of the, maybe even Atomic Habits or something like that, and just played, the 30 minutes of how it works. Because if I'm listening to this, hell, you don't have to do a call. You can do anything. Get creative. But I think if anybody's listening to this podcast, they care enough about development, they are interested in leadership, they obviously there's a reason that they're listening to this, and they might be thinking to themselves, man, well, I'd love to just be able to listen in and see how this goes, just so I can maybe borrow or get some better context to how that works. So who knows, maybe we'll have that discussion offline, and maybe we'll play them.
Brett, you're referring to the fact that we record the calls, right? So on our free conference line, we record the call at the beginning of that's another step in the process that we should be able to trust. It's like as the host is nearing the end of introductions, and he or she is getting ready to edify, welcome everybody, go through our pillars and edify the leader for the call. One of the things we do in the background is we set the recording. So then from that moment on, the tail end of the host edifying the leader of the call that week gets recorded through the call. So then it's the comments of the leader, it's the comments of everybody that's involved, and why
is that important? Well, it's kind of cool given this situation because now you can actually play it, and it could be stuff that you could share with other people. But that's not the reason why we recorded the call.
Right.
You know,
For sure.
You know, I remember Tori a couple of weeks back. I don't know, maybe 3, 4, 5 weeks back. I was like, man, that was a really good call. You did a really great job. And it was very inviting, very conversational. I just want to tell you, it was really good. He's like, oh, thanks, man, really? And you don't know when you're leading, you know, you don't know. So
Right.
that feedback's really good. And I said, man, we record the calls if you want to listen to it. I said, there's a lot of things that you did well, you may want to repeat. And he goes, really? And he didn't even know this. And I was like, yeah, you can go to freeconferencecall.com. Here's the login and listen to it if you want. So he immediately jumped on and he listened to his own.
That's great.
So what a cool coaching moment for himself,
Sure.
right? How many times have you done a presentation with a customer or any type of deal where you
Wonderful.
want to go back and review what you did so you can get better? And that just comes back to the platform again to give yourself another opportunity to go back and listen and say, you know what, I liked what I did there. I don't like what I did there. You know, this is for me all the time. My point was this. In the next 2 minutes, I just reinforced the same point over and over again, right? Maybe I should stop right at the point this, but you don't know that unless you listen to your own stuff and go back. So that's a really cool thought.
Also, for those that are looking at lead culture, you mentioned all that stuff. The conversations surrounding a water cooler, right? Like, they're gonna happen. It's just, you hope that those conversations are more effective, meaningful. Of course, everyone watches the latest sporting event, comes to work the next day and, has some dialogue about it. Or what you see on the news, you have the dialogue about the latest disaster. And this is intentionally creating dialogue about thoughtful ideas. And I don't know that quote. I wish I would hit my phone real quick, but it talks about, like, I don't know if it's productive minds spend most of their time talking about ideas, and destructive minds spend most of their time talking about people, and essentially maybe even tearing down people or blaming people. And I look at this platform as a way to just discuss ideas. And I think spending more of your time doing that doesn't mean you can't talk about the sporting event. Doesn't mean that occasionally you're not referencing but it just means for the most part, you're showing up to be intentional to discuss an idea that's meaningful.